As the first light of dawn crept through the fragile curtains of Sarah Miller's humble abode, it cast a gentle glow on the weathered furniture and peeling wallpaper, highlighting the house's silent testimony to years of financial hardship. Tucked away in a quaint Midwest town, this home bore the marks of struggle, with its water-stained ceiling and once vibrant carpet now threadbare and colorless. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. At 26, Sarah, a dedicated nurse, rushed through her morning routine in the tiny, cluttered kitchen. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a brief respite from the surrounding chaos. She quickly prepared a plate of scrambled eggs and placed it on the worn table, then set a bowl of cat food in its usual spot. Her cat, whiskers twitching in anticipation, sauntered over and began to eat. Entering her father's room, Sarah greeted him softly. "Good morning, Dad." Robert Miller, now elderly and frail, lay in bed with a gentle smile. His illness had taken a heavy toll on both of them, yet his spirit remained unbroken. "Morning, sweetheart," he replied, his voice a fragile whisper but still brimming with warmth. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah asked, masking her own fatigue with a forced smile. "I'm fine, Dad," she lied. "Just a bit tired from work. That's all." Though his eyes were dimmed by age, Robert saw through her facade. "You work too hard. Take care of yourself too." "Sarah," she nodded, handing him his medication. "I will, Dad. I promise." After ensuring her father was comfortable, Sarah grabbed her bag and dashed out the door, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down like a leaden shroud. The bus ride to City Hospital was a long, jarring journey, filled with ample time for her to ruminate over her mounting troubles. As she walked through the hospital corridors, the sterile smell of disinfectant and the incessant beeping of medical equipment enveloped her senses. Her pulse quickened with each step towards the surgical ward, where she worked under the intimidating gaze of Mark Donovan, the chief surgeon. Miss Miller, his deep, authoritative voice boomed as she entered the staff room. His presence was overwhelming, his demeanor a constant blend of superiority and disdain. "You're late." "I'm sorry, Doctor." Donovan, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. The bus was delayed. His eyes narrowed in disapproval. "Excuses won't keep this hospital running. I expect better from you." Sarah nodded, her jaw clenched in silent frustration. The tension between them was a tangible force, fueled by his relentless, inappropriate advances. His touch lingered too long, his compliments always tinged with a suggestive undertone. Sarah's discomfort grew with each passing day, but she felt trapped, needing the job to support her father. That evening, Sarah sought solace in a small cafe across from the hospital, nursing a cup of coffee as she tried to collect her scattered thoughts. The comforting warmth of the drink provided a brief escape from her relentless reality, but the weight of her burdens remained ever present, a constant reminder of the sacrifices she made daily. The weight of her situation bore down on her, a relentless knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. "Are you okay?" a gentle voice broke through her reverie. Sarah looked up to see a kind-eyed man, his clothes worn and weathered, but his smile warm and genuine. "I'm fine," she replied automatically, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The man hesitated, then took a seat across from her. "I'm Tom. You look like you could use someone to talk to." Sarah studied him for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I'm Sarah. I've had a rough day." Tom nodded understandingly. "Sometimes talking to a stranger can help. No judgments, just listening." For reasons she couldn't fully explain, Sarah found herself opening up to Tom. She told him about her father's illness, her struggles at work, and the unbearable tension with Mark Donovan. Tom listened quietly, his eyes filled with empathy, his presence a comforting anchor in her turbulent sea of emotions. As Sarah left the cafe that evening, she felt a small glimmer of hope flickering within her. Meeting Tom had been unexpected, but his kindness had given her a moment of respite from her worries. The next morning, as Sarah prepared to leave for the hospital, her father called out to her. "Sarah, remember what I said. Take care of yourself." "I will, Dad," she promised, her voice imbued with newfound determination. The fluorescent lights of the hospital cast a harsh glare over the surgical area. The sterile environment, with its constant hum of machines and the sharp scent of antiseptic, was a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within Sarah. She moved mechanically through her tasks, her mind a whirl of anxiety and dread. It had been an especially grueling day, and her encounter with Dr. Mark Donovan loomed fresh in her mind. His insinuations and unwelcome touches had escalated over the weeks, making her dread every shift. As she prepped for another surgery, the tension in the room was palpable. "Miss Miller, I need you to focus." Mark's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and commanding. His eyes bore into hers, a silent threat lurking beneath the surface. Sarah's hands trembled as she handed him the surgical instruments. "I am focused, Dr. Donovan," she replied, her voice barely concealing her fear. Mark's lips curled into a smug smile. "Good. We can't afford any mistakes." Each word from him felt like a dagger, twisting her anxiety into a tighter knot. She tried to steady her hands, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. The hours dragged on, each one more exhausting than the last. By the time her shift ended, Sarah felt utterly drained, the emotional and physical toll of the day leaving her feeling hollow. As she stepped out of the hospital, the cool evening air hit her face, a small comfort after the suffocating atmosphere inside. She thought of Tom's kind eyes and gentle words, and for a brief moment, she felt a flicker of strength. She knew she had to face another day with Mark, but she also knew she wasn't alone in her struggle. Returning home, she found her father waiting for her with a concerned look. "Sarah, you need to find your happiness," he said softly, his frail hand reaching out to hers. "Promise me you'll look after yourself." "I promise, Dad," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. As she lay in bed that night, Sarah felt a mix of fear and hope. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but she was determined to find her way through them. Tom's unexpected kindness had reminded her that even in the darkest times, there could be moments of light and compassion. The surgery dragged on, each moment fraying Sarah's nerves further. When it finally concluded, she began to clean up, only to find herself cornered by Mark in the supply room. His breath was hot against her ear. "You should learn to relax, Sarah," he whispered, his hand grazing her waist. "It would make things much easier for both of us." The words sent a jolt of anger through her. She recoiled, her frustration boiling over. "I am here to work, not to be your plaything," she snapped, pushing him away. Mark's expression darkened, a menacing glint in his eyes. "You're making a big mistake, Sarah. Don't think you're irreplaceable." The threat hung in the air as Sarah stormed out, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. She knew the consequences of defying Mark could be severe, but she couldn't endure his harassment any longer. That evening, Sarah found herself at the familiar cafe across from the hospital. The warm, inviting atmosphere was a stark contrast to the cold, clinical environment she had just left. She slumped into a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to steady her racing thoughts. "Rough day?" a gentle voice asked. Sarah looked up to see Tom Bradford standing by her table, his kind eyes filled with concern. Despite his shabby appearance, there was a warmth to him that made Sarah feel safe. You could say that she replied, managing a weak smile. Tom took a seat across from her, his presence calming. "Want to talk about it?" For a moment, Sarah hesitated, but then she took a deep breath and began to tell him everything: Mark's harassment, her fear of losing her job, and the pressure of caring for her father. Tom listened intently, his expression serious and empathetic. "That sounds incredibly tough, Sarah. No one should have to go through that alone. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do, Tom. I can't quit my job, but I can't keep going like this either. Tom reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on hers. You're stronger than you think. Don't let that man destroy your spirit. There are people who care about you and will support you. Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. Thank you, Tom. It helps just to talk to someone. Tom smiled warmly. Anytime, Sarah. Remember, you're not alone. As the evening wore on, Sarah felt a sense of relief. She left the cafe with a glimmer of hope, bolstered by Tom's kindness. The suffocating weight of her burdens felt a little lighter, and the looming shadow of Mark Donovan seemed less threatening. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a spark of determination to fight back against the darkness that had been closing in on her. But the reality of her situation still loomed large, and she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The following morning, Sarah received a call from the hospital's administration. Her heart sank as she listened to the stern voice on the other end. Miss Miller, we need to discuss your recent behavior. Please come to the office immediately. Sarah's stomach churned with anxiety as she made her way to the hospital. She knew this could be the end of her career. As she entered the administrative office, Mark Donovan was there, his smug expression confirming her worst fears. Miss Miller, your actions yesterday were completely unacceptable, the administrator began. Doctor, Donovan has raised serious concerns about your conduct. Sarah's mind raced. She knew Mark had twisted the situation to his advantage. He's lying, she protested. He's been harassing me for weeks, and I finally stood up to him. The administrator looked skeptical. These are serious allegations, Miss Miller. We will investigate, but for now you are suspended pending further review. Sarah's world crumbled. She left the office in a daze, her career hanging by a thread. As she exited the hospital, the weight of her predicament pressed down on her. In a daze, she wandered back to the cafe, where Tom was waiting. What happened, he asked, seeing the devastation on her face. I've been suspended, she said, her voice breaking. Mark's lies are destroying my life. The dimly lit living room of Sarah's home reflected her state of mind. Shadows clung to the corners, and the silence was broken only by the ticking of an old clock. Sarah sat on the worn-out couch, her thoughts racing. The suspension from the hospital hung over her like a dark cloud. She had spent the day replaying the confrontation with Mark in her mind, each memory sharpening her sense of injustice. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. She opened it to find Tom standing there, his kind eyes filled with concern. Mind if I come in? Of course, Tom. I could use some company, Sarah replied, stepping aside to let him in. She led him to the living room and gestured for him to sit. Tom looked around, taking in the modest surroundings. Sarah, I can't believe what you're going through, Tom said, his voice filled with empathy. You don't deserve this. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. I don't know what to do, Tom. I feel so helpless. Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. You have to fight this, Sarah. You can't let Mark get away with it. There are people who can help you, lawyers, advocates. You're not alone in this. Sarah wiped her tears away, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Do you really think I can win? Tom nodded firmly. I do, and I'll be here with you every step of the way. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time since her suspension, she felt a spark of determination. She wasn't going to let Mark ruin her life. With Tom's support, she knew she had the strength to fight back. As the night wore on, they talked about strategies and resources, planning the steps Sarah would take to clear her name and seek justice. Tom's unwavering belief in her gave her the courage she needed to face the daunting battle ahead. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings with legal advisors and gathering evidence. Sarah's resolve grew stronger with each passing day. Tom's constant presence and encouragement were a beacon of hope in her darkest moments. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Sarah felt empowered for the first time in weeks. One afternoon, as she reviewed documents in the cafe, Tom arrived with a determined look. "Sarah, I found a lawyer who specializes in workplace harassment cases. She's willing to take your case." Sarah's eyes widened with hope. "Really? That's amazing, Tom. Thank you so much." Tom smiled warmly. "I told you, Sarah, you're not alone in this. We'll get through it together." With renewed determination, Sarah set out to fight for her rights and reclaim her life. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found an ally in Tom, and with his support, she knew she could overcome anything. "How are you holding up?" Tom asked, his voice gentle yet filled with concern. Sarah sighed heavily as she sat down beside him, the weight of her worries etched on her face. "It's been tough. I can't stop thinking about what happened. I'm scared, Tom. What if I lose my job for good?" Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and comforting. "You're stronger than you realize, Sarah. We'll figure this out together." As they talked, Sarah found herself opening up to Tom more than she had with anyone else. She shared her deepest fears, her father's deteriorating condition, and the overwhelming pressure she felt bearing the brunt of her responsibilities alone. "There's something I should tell you," Tom said quietly, his tone suddenly serious. "I haven't been completely honest about my past." Sarah looked at him, her curiosity piqued and a hint of concern in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Tom took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before he spoke. "I wasn't always homeless. I used to have a good job, a family. But I lost everything when the company I worked for went bankrupt. I couldn't find work, and eventually I ended up on the streets. It's been a long road, but meeting you has given me hope again." Sarah's heart ached for him, a wave of empathy washing over her. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I had no idea." Tom smiled, though his eyes held a bittersweet expression. "It's okay. We all have our struggles. But it's made me realize how important it is to fight for what's right and to support each other. You're not alone in this, Sarah." Moved by his honesty, Sarah felt a deeper connection to Tom. His story resonated with her own struggles, and she found solace in knowing that they both understood the pain of loss and the strength needed to rebuild. "You've been through so much," Sarah said softly, "yet you still find the strength to help others. That's incredible, Tom." Tom shrugged modestly. "We all need a little help sometimes, and sometimes being there for someone else gives us the strength to keep going ourselves." Sarah nodded, feeling a newfound determination rising within her. "You're right. We can't let our circumstances define us. We have to keep fighting." Tom squeezed her shoulder gently. "Exactly. And you've got me by your side now. We'll take this one step at a time." As they sat together in the quiet of Sarah's living room, the burdens they carried felt a little lighter. They had found an unexpected bond in their shared resilience, and with each other's support, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The following days were filled with preparation and planning. Sarah gathered all the evidence she could, documenting her interactions with Mark and reaching out to potential witnesses who could support her claims. Tom, true to his word, was with her every step of the way, offering encouragement and practical advice. One afternoon, as they worked through a particularly challenging piece of evidence, Sarah looked at Tom and felt a surge of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Tom. Thank you for everything." Tom smiled, his eyes reflecting the warmth of his heart. "We're in this together, Sarah, and we're going to come out stronger on the other side." With Tom's unwavering support and her own growing resolve, Sarah knew she could face the battle ahead. The road was long and uncertain, but for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope that justice would prevail. And through it all, she had found an ally and a friend in Tom, whose kindness and strength had given her the courage to stand up for herself and fight for what was right. "Thank you for sharing that with me. It means a lot," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. Tom hesitated before speaking again, his tone serious. "There's something else. I want to help you fight back against Mark. I've been talking to some people who might be able to help." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You've been doing that for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Tom nodded. "You deserve justice, Sarah, and I want to be there for you, every step of the way." A surge of gratitude and trust washed over Sarah. "Thank you, Tom. I don't know what I'd do without you." Later that evening, as their conversation wound down, Sarah made a decision. "Tom, would you like to stay for dinner? It's not much, but I'd love to have you here." Tom smiled warmly, his eyes reflecting his appreciation. "I'd be honored." They shared a simple meal, the atmosphere lightened by their growing friendship. As they talked and laughed, Sarah felt a sense of normalcy returning, if only for a moment. It was the first time in weeks that she felt a glimmer of hope. After dinner, they sat together on the couch, the warmth of their companionship filling the room. "Thank you for being here," Sarah said softly. "It means more than you know." Tom took her hand in his grip gentle but reassuring. "You're not alone, Sarah. We'll get through this together." As the night drew to a close, Sarah walked Tom to the door. "Good night, Tom, and thank you again." "Good night, Sarah. Remember, you're stronger than you think," Tom replied, giving her hand a final squeeze before stepping out into the night. The next morning, Sarah woke with a renewed sense of determination. She couldn't let Mark win. She had to fight back, not just for herself, but for all the others who might be suffering in silence. With Tom by her side, she felt a newfound strength. As she prepared breakfast, Sarah's thoughts turned to the plan they had discussed. It would be risky, but it was their best shot at exposing Mark's true nature. She took a deep breath, ready to confront the battles that lay ahead. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Sarah's bedroom, casting a soft glow on her weary face. She forced herself out of bed, the weight of yesterday's events pressing down on her, but she knew she had to keep moving forward. Determined, she spent the morning gathering evidence and organizing her thoughts. She reached out to a lawyer Tom had recommended, who specialized in workplace harassment cases. As she recounted her experiences, the lawyer listened intently, offering reassurance and legal advice. Later that day, Sarah met Tom at the cafe. "How did it go?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "It went well," Sarah replied, feeling a bit more confident. "The lawyer thinks we have a strong case. I'm scared, but I know this is the right thing to do." Tom's eyes shone with pride. "I'm glad to hear that, Sarah. You're doing the right thing, and you're not alone." The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah's determination grew stronger as she gathered testimonies from colleagues who had witnessed Mark's inappropriate behavior. Each piece of evidence fortified her resolve to see justice done. One evening, as Sarah and Tom sat in her living room, reviewing documents, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for his unwavering support. "Tom, I don't know how to thank you enough. You've been my rock through all of this." Tom smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. We're in this together, and we're going to win." As the legal battle loomed closer, Sarah felt both anxious and hopeful. The support from Tom and the courage she found within herself were her guiding lights. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but with each passing day, she felt more prepared to face whatever challenges came her way. The morning of the hearing, Sarah stood in front of the mirror, straightening her blouse and taking a deep breath. The fear was still there, but so was the determination. She glanced at a photo of her father on the dresser and whispered, I'm doing this for us, Dad." Arriving at the courthouse, Sarah felt a wave of anxiety, but Tom's presence beside her was a calming force. As they walked in, Tom squeezed her hand. "You've got this, Sarah. I believe in you." The proceedings were intense, with Mark's smug confidence slowly eroding as evidence against him mounted. Sarah's testimony was powerful, backed by the support of her colleagues and the meticulous preparation by her lawyer. As the hearing drew to a close, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her, but she held her head high, knowing she had fought bravely for justice. After what felt like an eternity, the verdict was announced. Mark Donovan was found guilty of harassment, and Sarah's suspension was lifted. Relief and triumph washed over her as she stepped out of the courthouse. Tom was waiting for her, a proud smile on his face. "You did it, Sarah. You won." Tears of joy and relief streamed down her face. "We did it, Tom. I couldn't have done it without you." Tom hugged her tightly. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah, and you're never alone." As they walked away from the courthouse, Sarah felt a profound sense of victory. She had faced her fears, stood up for herself, and reclaimed her life. With Tom by her side, she knew she could face whatever the future held, stronger and more determined than ever before. "Good morning, Dad," Sarah called softly as she entered Robert's room. She paused, expecting to hear his usual reply. Silence greeted her instead. Her heart pounded as she approached the bed. Robert lay there, his eyes closed, his face serene but his body unnaturally still. "Dad," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She touched his hand. It was cold. Her breath caught in her throat, and tears welled up in her eyes. "No, no, please," she pleaded, shaking him gently, but there was no response. The reality hit her like a tidal wave. Robert was gone. Sarah collapsed beside the bed, her sobs echoing through the quiet house. The world around her seemed to blur as her tears fell uncontrollably. The man who had been her rock, her source of strength, was no longer there. She felt a crushing emptiness, a pain that words could not describe. Days later, the house was filled with a somber silence. Sarah sat on the couch, numb, staring blankly at the floor. The sound of the doorbell broke her trance. She opened the door to find a solemn-faced man in a black suit. "Miss Miller, I'm sorry for your loss," he said gently. "My name is John Anderson. I'm here on behalf of Megan Stewart." Sarah blinked, confusion mingling with her grief. "Who, Megan Stewart?" John repeated, handing her a business card. "She's aware of your situation and would like to offer her assistance. Please call her when you're ready." Sarah took the card, her fingers trembling. "Thank you," she murmured, barely registering his words. John nodded respectfully and left, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway, clutching the card like a lifeline. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. Friends and neighbors came to pay their respects, but Sarah felt disconnected, as if she were observing from a distance. The funeral was a small, intimate affair. Sarah stood by the grave, her eyes red and swollen from crying, as the minister spoke words of comfort that barely penetrated her sorrow. After the service, as people began to leave, Sarah noticed John Anderson standing by a sleek black car. He approached her again, offering his condolences once more. "Miss Miller, I know this is a difficult time, but please consider contacting Megan Stewart. She can help you." She watched as John drove away, her mind a swirl of confusion and despair. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her father's room, the quiet ticking of the clock the only sound. She stared at the business card, turning it over in her hands. Megan Stewart. Who was she, and why did she want to help? Desperation and curiosity gnawed at her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah picked up the phone and dialed the number. The line rang twice before a warm, authoritative voice answered. "Megan Stewart speaking, MS. Stewart, my name is Sarah Miller," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "Your representative, John Anderson, gave me your card. "Yes, Sarah." "I've been expecting your call," Megan replied, her tone calm and reassuring. "First, let me extend my deepest sympathies for your loss. I know this must be an incredibly difficult time for you." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, tears welling up again. "I understand you've been through a lot, both personally and professionally," Megan continued. "I would like to meet with you to discuss how I can help." "Would you be available tomorrow morning?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded to herself. "Yes, I can be available." "Excellent. I'll send a car to pick you up at 10 a.m. Please take care of yourself, Sarah. We'll talk soon." After hanging up, Sarah felt a mix of apprehension and hope. She didn't know what to expect, but she had nothing left to lose. The following morning, she dressed in her best clothes, though they felt like a poor attempt to cover the rawness of her grief. The sleek black car glided silently through the bustling streets of downtown Chicago, a stark contrast to Sarah Miller's usual environment. She sat in the back seat, nervously fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. The luxury of the car, with its leather seats and tinted windows, felt surreal. As they approached a towering glass office building, Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The driver opened the door for her, and Sarah stepped out, feeling dwarfed by the modern, opulent architecture. She entered the lobby, its marble floors gleaming under the bright lights, and approached the reception desk. "Miss Miller, right this way," the receptionist said with a warm smile, leading her to a private elevator. The ride to the top floor was swift, and Sarah found herself in a spacious, elegantly decorated office. Behind a large mahogany desk sat a poised woman with striking features. "Miss Miller, welcome," she greeted, standing to shake Sarah's hand. "I'm Megan Stewart." "Please, have a seat." "Thank you," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. She sat down, her mind racing with questions. Megan smiled reassuringly. "I understand you've been through a lot lately. First, let me offer my condolences for your loss." "I'm truly sorry." "Thank you," Sarah said, grateful for the kind words. Megan's expression grew serious. "Sarah, I want to be transparent with you. Tom Bradford is my cousin. He's been living as a homeless man as part of a personal experiment to understand life on the streets. When he met you, he saw someone who needed help and couldn't turn away." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Tom, he's your cousin?" "Yes," Megan confirmed. "Tom has always been driven by a desire to make a difference. He told me about your situation, and we both believe that you deserve justice." Sarah felt a mix of emotions: relief, confusion, and a renewed sense of hope. "I had no idea." "He's been so kind to me," Megan nodded. "Tom has a good heart. He saw in you someone who needed support, and he wanted to help. Now, we need to address the issue at the hospital. Tom told me about Mark Donovan's harassment. We need to gather evidence and testimonies from others who have suffered under his behavior." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop him. He's been terrorizing me and others for too long." Megan smiled, a look of approval in her eyes. "That's the spirit. My team will assist you in collecting the necessary evidence. Together we can build a strong case against Donovan." As they discussed the next steps, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the resources now available to her. Megan's influence and Tom's unexpected identity gave her a powerful ally in her fight for justice. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. With Megan's support, Sarah reached out to her colleagues at the hospital, seeking their stories and encouraging them to come forward. The response was overwhelming. Nurses, technicians, and even some administrative staff shared their experiences of Donovan's inappropriate behavior and abuse of power. One afternoon, Sarah sat with Megan in a conference room, reviewing the gathered testimonies. "This is more than enough to take him down," Megan said confidently. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. "I can't believe so many people were affected. It's heartbreaking. Megan placed a hand on her shoulder. You've done something incredibly brave, Sarah. By standing up, you've given others the courage to do the same. Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of empowerment she hadn't experienced in a long time. Thank you, Megan, and please thank Tom for me. I don't know where I'd be without him. Megan's eyes softened. I will. He's very proud of you, as am I. Now, let's finish this. The day of reckoning came swiftly. With the compiled evidence, Megan's legal team filed a formal complaint against Mark Donovan. The atmosphere in Megan Stewart's office was charged with urgency and determination. The sleek, modern decor contrasted sharply with the gravity of the task at hand. Sarah sat at the conference table, surrounded by Megan's investigative team, feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. Megan stood at the head of the table, her expression resolute. We've already gathered significant evidence against Mark Donovan, but we need to be thorough. Let's start with the testimonies. One of the investigators, a meticulous woman named Linda, began. We've interviewed several staff members, past and present. Their stories are disturbingly similar. Sarah listened intently as Linda detailed accounts of harassment and abuse that echoed her own experiences. Each testimony added weight to their case, painting a damning picture of Donovan's conduct. As the meeting progressed, Megan outlined their strategy for the upcoming hearing. We'll present our case systematically, starting with the most compelling testimonies. The goal is to show a clear pattern of behavior. Sarah felt a surge of determination. We need to make sure this never happens to anyone else. He has to be held accountable. Megan nodded. And he will be, thanks to you. The weeks leading up to the hearing were intense. Sarah worked closely with Megan's team, preparing her own testimony and supporting her colleagues who were also coming forward. The solidarity among them was palpable, each person's courage bolstering the next. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. Sarah, Megan, and Tom, along with the legal team and several hospital staff members, gathered in the courthouse. The air was thick with anticipation and nerves. Sarah's heart pounded as they entered the courtroom, but Tom's reassuring presence beside her provided comfort. As the proceedings began, Megan's legal team presented their case with precision and clarity. Witness after witness took the stand, their testimonies weaving a damning narrative of Mark Donovan's abuse of power. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she took a deep breath and walked to the stand, feeling the weight of her responsibility. She spoke clearly and confidently, recounting her experiences and the impact they had on her life. Throughout her testimony, she could see Donovan's smug expression falter, replaced by a growing realization of the gravity of the situation. By the end of the hearing, the evidence against Donovan was overwhelming. The judge listened intently, and when the verdict was finally announced, Sarah felt a rush of relief. Mark Donovan was found guilty of harassment and abuse of power. The decision was a significant victory, not only for Sarah but for everyone who had suffered under his behavior. As they left the courthouse, Sarah turned to Tom and Megan, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you both. I couldn't have done this without you. Tom smiled, his eyes reflecting his pride in her. You did it, Sarah. You stood up and fought back. Megan nodded. This is just the beginning. Your courage has set a powerful example. As they walked away from the courthouse, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. She had faced her fears, stood up for what was right, and won. With Tom and Megan by her side, she knew she could face any challenge that lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt full of promise. Mark has been using his position to harass and intimidate for years, Linda explained, her voice steady but laced with outrage. Sarah listened intently as Linda detailed the accounts. Each story echoed her own experiences, and the weight of the collective trauma was palpable. "It's horrifying to think how long this has been going on," Sarah said quietly. Megan nodded. "It is. But now we have a chance to stop him." Let's move on to the video evidence. Another investigator, James, pulled up security footage on a large screen. We reviewed hours of footage from various locations within the hospital. This is from the surgical ward. The room fell silent as they watched Mark's interactions with different staff members. His behavior, once hidden behind closed doors, was now laid bare. The evidence was damning unwanted touches, invasive comments, and moments of clear intimidation. Sarah's stomach churned as she relived her own encounters through the experiences of others. But alongside the nausea, there was a growing sense of vindication. "This is it," she whispered. "This proves everything." James nodded. "There's more. We've also found footage from a recent incident that clearly shows Mark trying to coerce a nurse into silence." The video played, and the room watched as Mark cornered a young nurse, his demeanor threatening. Her fear was evident, and the team's collective anger grew. "He's a predator," Megan said, her voice steely. "And we have enough to bring him down." Sarah looked around the room, seeing the determination in everyone's eyes. What happens next? "We present this to the hospital board and the authorities," Megan replied. "With this evidence, they won't be able to ignore it. Mark will face consequences for his actions." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Megan's team prepared the case meticulously, ensuring every piece of evidence was irrefutable. Sarah continued to work closely with them, providing additional details and support wherever she could. Finally, the day came to present their findings. Sarah, Megan, and the team entered the boardroom, where the hospital's board members awaited. The tension was thick as Megan began her presentation. "Good afternoon. We're here to address serious allegations against Dr. Mark Donovan. Our investigation has uncovered a pattern of misconduct that cannot be ignored." She gestured to James, who began displaying the evidence on a large screen. As the board members watched the videos and read through the testimonies, their expressions shifted from skepticism to shock and anger. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps justice would finally be served. Linda took the floor next, her voice unwavering as she recounted the stories of the staff members who had come forward. Each testimony was a piece of a larger puzzle that painted a disturbing picture of abuse and manipulation. The evidence was undeniable, and the room was heavy with the realization of the extent of Mark's misconduct. As the presentation concluded, Megan addressed the board directly. "The evidence presented today is a clear indication that Dr. Mark Donovan has been abusing his power for far too long. We are calling for immediate action to be taken to ensure the safety and well-being of all hospital staff and patients." The board members conferred amongst themselves, their faces grave. Finally, the head of the board, a stern woman named Dr. Thompson, spoke. "We are deeply disturbed by what we have seen today. Dr. Donovan's actions are unacceptable, and we will be conducting a thorough investigation. Effective immediately, Dr. Donovan is suspended from his duties pending the outcome of this investigation." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Sarah felt tears of gratitude welling up in her eyes. Megan turned to her, a triumphant smile on her face. "This is just the beginning, Sarah. You've made a huge difference today." As they left the boardroom, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The fight was not over, but they had taken a significant step towards justice. With the hospital's administration finally taking action, the future looked a little brighter. Over the next few weeks, the investigation continued. Mark's suspension became a topic of discussion throughout the hospital, and more staff members felt emboldened to come forward with their own stories. The atmosphere began to shift as people felt a renewed sense of safety and solidarity. One evening, as Sarah sat with Tom at the cafe, She reflected on how much had changed. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said, her voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and pride. "It feels like a different place now." Tom smiled warmly. "You've done something incredible, Sarah. You stood up against a powerful adversary and made a real difference. That's something to be proud of." Sarah nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you and Megan. Your support meant everything." Tom took her hand, his touch reassuring. "And we'll keep supporting you, no matter what. You're never alone in this fight." As they walked home that night, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead might still be challenging, but she knew she had the strength and the support to face whatever came next. Together with her allies, she had turned the tide against Mark Donovan, and she was determined to continue fighting for justice and change. When the presentation concluded, the board members conferred briefly before the chairman spoke. "This evidence is compelling and deeply troubling. We will initiate immediate disciplinary action against Dr. Donovan and turn this over to the authorities." Relief washed over Sarah. The years of fear and intimidation were finally coming to an end. She turned to Megan, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." Megan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You were brave enough to speak up, Sarah. That took incredible strength. Now, let's make sure he faces justice." As they left the boardroom, Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The fight wasn't over, but they had made significant progress. Mark Donovan would no longer be able to abuse his power. Back in Megan's office, the mood was one of quiet triumph. "This is just the beginning," Megan said. "We need to support the other victims and ensure they get the justice they deserve." Sarah nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I want to help. No one should have to go through what I did." "You will," Megan assured her. "And with your help, we'll make sure this never happens again." The courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations as people filled the seats, the anticipation thick in the air. Sarah Miller sat nervously in the front row, surrounded by a group of women who had also come forward to testify against Mark Donovan. Each one of them had experienced his predatory behavior, and today they were united in seeking justice. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The trial commenced with the prosecution presenting their case. Megan Stewart and her team had meticulously prepared the evidence, ensuring that every detail was irrefutable. Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and determination as she waited for her turn to testify. "Call Sarah Miller to the stand," the prosecutor announced. Sarah stood, her legs trembling slightly, and made her way to the witness stand. Taking a deep breath, she faced the courtroom, the memories of her encounters with Donovan flooding back, but fueling her resolve. The prosecutor began with straightforward questions, easing her into recounting her experiences. Sarah spoke clearly, detailing the harassment and intimidation she had endured. As she described the incidents, she could feel the support of the women behind her, their presence a powerful reminder that she was not alone. The defense attempted to discredit her, but Sarah remained composed, her responses firm and unwavering. She felt a surge of confidence, bolstered by the knowledge that the truth was on her side. After what felt like an eternity, her testimony concluded. She returned to her seat, her heart pounding but a sense of accomplishment settling in. The trial continued with other witnesses, each story painting a damning picture of Mark Donovan's actions. Days turned into weeks, and the courtroom sessions were grueling. Yet, the solidarity among the victims and the strength of their collective testimony created an undeniable case against Donovan. Megan's legal team relentlessly pursued justice, presenting evidence after evidence, making it clear that Donovan's behavior was not just an isolated incident, but a pattern of abuse. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as everyone awaited the judge's decision. The judge reviewed the evidence and testimonies, his expression stern and contemplative. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, it is clear that Dr. Mark Donovan has engaged in a consistent pattern of harassment and abuse. This behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. I find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective sigh of relief and triumph swept through the courtroom. Sarah felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. Justice had been served. As the women embraced, their shared victory was a testament to their courage and resilience. Outside the courthouse, the media buzzed with questions and cameras flashing. Sarah stood with Megan and the other women, ready to face the world. "This is a victory for all of us," Megan said, addressing the reporters. "But it's also a reminder that we must continue to fight against harassment and abuse in all forms." Sarah stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "We stood up to a bully and won. And we'll keep standing up for ourselves and for others. No one should suffer in silence." As the crowd applauded, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey had been arduous, but she had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. With the support of her newfound allies, she knew she could face any challenge ahead. Walking away from the courthouse, Sarah felt a new chapter beginning. The road to justice had been long and difficult, but she had found her voice and her strength. And with friends like Tom and Megan by her side, she knew she could build a future free from fear and filled with hope. She took a deep breath as she sat down, glancing briefly at Mark Donovan, who sat with a smug expression at the defense table. "Miss Miller, please describe your experiences with Dr. Donovan," the prosecutor began. Sarah nodded, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. She recounted the harassment, the unwanted touches, and the threats. As she spoke, she could see the impact her testimony had on the jury. The gravity of her experiences, shared with such raw honesty, left a palpable silence in the room. Next, other victims took the stand, each adding their own harrowing accounts to the growing list of accusations. The pattern of abuse became undeniable, painting a damning picture of Mark Donovan's character. The defense tried to discredit the testimonies, but Megan's team had anticipated every move. The video evidence, combined with the consistent stories of multiple victims, left little room for doubt. The turning point came when a former nurse, who had moved out of state to escape Donovan's influence, provided a powerful testimony via video call. Her story mirrored Sarah's, reinforcing the undeniable truth. After days of testimonies and arguments, the trial reached its climax. The jury deliberated for hours, but to Sarah, it felt like an eternity. Finally, they returned, and the courtroom held its breath. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor," the jury foreman replied. "We find the defendant, Mark Donovan, guilty on all counts." A wave of relief and triumph washed over Sarah. She glanced at the other victims, who shared her sense of vindication. Mark Donovan's expression shifted from smug confidence to shock and anger as the reality of his conviction set in. The judge turned to Donovan. "Dr. Donovan, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of harassment, assault, and abuse of power. Your actions have caused immense harm, and you will be held accountable. I hereby sentence you to 15 years in prison." As Donovan was led away in handcuffs, Sarah felt a profound sense of justice. The weight of years of fear and intimidation lifted from her shoulders. Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged Megan and the other women who had stood by her side throughout this ordeal. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Sarah, feeling both exhausted and elated, stepped forward. Today, justice was served. Mark Donovan used his power to hurt and intimidate countless individuals. But together we stood up, we spoke out. And we made sure he could no longer harm anyone else. This victory isn't just for us, it's for all those who might be suffering in silence. I urge anyone in similar situations to find their voice and seek help. You're not alone. Megan stepped beside her, echoing the sentiment. This case has shown that when we support each other and stand up for what is right, we can make real change. We will continue to fight for justice and ensure safe, respectful workplaces for everyone. As the crowd applauded, Sarah felt a new sense of purpose. She had faced her fears and emerged stronger. With the support of her friends and allies, she was ready to move forward, using her experience to help others and advocate for change. In the weeks that followed, Sarah worked closely with Megan's organization to support other victims of workplace harassment. She became a powerful advocate, sharing her story at events and workshops, inspiring others to speak out and seek justice. The solidarity among the women she had met during the trial grew into a supportive network, helping countless others find the strength to fight back against abuse. Through it all, Tom remained a steadfast presence in Sarah's life, offering unwavering support and encouragement. Their bond deepened, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Together, they looked forward to a future where justice, respect, and dignity prevailed. As Sarah reflected on her journey, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. The battle had been arduous, but she had found her voice and her strength. And with allies like Megan and Tom by her side, she knew she could face any challenge that lay ahead. The future was bright, and Sarah was ready to embrace it with courage and determination. Nightmare finally felt like a distant memory. Back at the hospital, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The shadow that Mark Donovan had cast over the staff was lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and solidarity. Sarah walked through the halls, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. She noticed colleagues smiling more, the tension that had once filled the air now dissipated. In Megan's office, a small celebration was underway. "Congratulations," Sarah Megan said, hugging her warmly. "You've been incredibly brave, and your strength has made all the difference." Tom stood nearby, his eyes filled with pride. "We couldn't have done it without you, Sarah." Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done it alone." As the celebration continued, the room buzzed with laughter and camaraderie. Colleagues who had been strangers bonded over their shared victory, and the sense of community grew stronger. Sarah found herself surrounded by people who had supported her, and she realized how much they had all gained from standing together. Megan raised her glass for a toast, to Sarah for her courage and determination, and to all of us for proving that when we stand together, we can overcome anything. Everyone echoed the toast, clinking glasses and cheering. Sarah looked around the room, her heart swelling with gratitude. The nightmare was indeed over, and a new chapter had begun. Later, as the celebration wound down, Sarah and Tom found a quiet corner to talk. "I can't believe how much has changed," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like a weight has been lifted from all of us." Tom nodded. "You were the catalyst, Sarah. Your bravery inspired everyone. And look at what you've achieved. You turned the tide not just for yourself, but for so many others." Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tom. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Tom smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "We're a team, Sarah, and we'll face whatever comes next together." As they left Megan's office and walked through the now peaceful hospital, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but she knew she was ready for whatever it held. With Tom by her side and the support of her friends and colleagues, she felt stronger than ever. In the days that followed, Sarah continued her work at the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She became an advocate for workplace safety and respect, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up against injustice. The hospital administration implemented new policies to ensure a safe and supportive environment for all staff, and the positive changes were palpable. Sarah's relationship with Tom blossomed. their shared experiences deepening their bond. They supported each other through challenges and celebrated their victories together, building a future filled with love and respect. Reflecting on her journey, Sarah realized that she had found her strength not just in fighting back, but in the connection she had made and the support she had received. She had turned her pain into power, and her story became a beacon of hope for others facing similar battles. The nightmare was over, but the lessons learned and the strength gained would stay with Sarah forever. She had emerged from the darkness, stronger and more determined, ready to face the future with courage and hope. And with her allies by her side, she knew that anything was possible. As we come to the end of Sarah's incredible journey, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful lessons we've learned. From an unemployed nurse given a business card by a homeless man, we witnessed the transformative power of courage, solidarity, and perseverance. Sarah's story reminds us that no matter how dark the circumstances, standing up for justice can bring about profound change. What have you learned from Sarah's story? We invite you to share one thing you've learned and will bring into practice in your own life. Leave your comment below, and let's inspire each other to make a difference. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.